G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. Today I thought I would do a second True Eagle video 2 days in a row. How lucky are you guys? I haven't really been as regular lately on the channel, but now we're starting to get a little bit more clarity on where things are at. Obviously 24 hours ago I released a video talking about how West Coast was granted an assistance package from the AFL in the form of a first round draft pick or end of first round draft pick, which is likely to end up probably in the early 20s at this stage. So if you want to see my thoughts on that, as it happens, that was the last video on this channel. Today I wanted to sort of back up that particular video because Pike has done an interview sort of discussing our general list strategy and the impact that first round draft pick we've been granted is likely to have. And I thought there were some interesting points he made during that interview. And then of course I do also want to talk about the fact that a player has requested a trade to West Coast a few hours ago as I record this in Melbourne. So we'll talk about Tyler Young as well. Well, I guess we'll start there, actually, and then we'll go through some of the comments by Pike. Before I get into it, if you could do me a favour, I would really appreciate it if you guys would consider subscribing to the channel if it's something that you watch regularly and if you enjoy this content. You also want to see me talk about the trade and draft period in particular over the rest of the course of the season. I'll be here probably till December and then back at it again for 2026. So I'd appreciate it if you haven't subscribed, if you considered doing so. Let's start with Tyler Young. Tyler Young has requested a trade to West Coast. He's played 35 games. He is 27 years old, so his name is not indicative of his age at all. That's a complete myth. What am I saying? That was a horrible start. Look, I'm really pleased about this. There is a temptation to sort of blow out of proportion a little bit the possible impact of a player who's nominated to come to your club. I just think for so many reasons this is a great move for West Coast. First of all, it's a really pleasant surprise to see that we've won his signature when he was offered 3 years to stay at Richmond and we have offered him 3 years as well. Pleasantly surprised. He's not West Australian. I think the only meaningful connection to West Coast is McQualter, Baker and Graham. So it's unclear from the outside to what extent that has had an impact, but you'd have to think it was a pretty positive relationship, I would imagine. He could have stayed at Richmond. I'm not really sure exactly what the depth of their key back stocks are like. I know Bolter is obviously a great player there, but I suppose with Tyler Young, I think we can be fairly confident, he can be fairly confident he's going to walk into a best 22 spot at West Coast. I actually think he's a pretty handy player. And not only that, there is no reason to suggest this should not be a fairly cheap deal for West Coast to get done. So I think it's probably the inverse of the point I made about Liam Ryan, where I think what he offers us exceeds what we're likely to get in a trade. This is probably the opposite of that, where I know he's not going to cost much, and he's a best 22 player that improves us and he's mature. And if you've been following this channel for a while, I have been talking about the Eagles' need for a key back for a number of years now. I was really hot on us going for Jed Buslinger. I sort of wanted us to draft one over the last couple. And then, of course, in that time, we've lost Jeremy McGovern and Tom Barrass. And Harry Edwards has emerged as a pretty good player, but I think that there is always going to be questions around his body. He's barely strung a solid run of games together. That is also kind of true of Tyler Young. He has done an ACL, I think, in 2024. He's just played the 7 games this year. But, I think the footy he has played at AFL level is fairly advanced. And I think after 35 games, he's probably further along where Harry was maybe at the start of this year. So, very pleased with that. I think we go into 2026 with Edwards and Young as our first 2 choice key backs. And then we got some flexibility around guys like Sandy Brock, Rhett Bazzo, and of course Jinby, who sometimes plays that role. Does it free up Jinby? Probably does. So that helps. Jinby can probably play less of a one-on-one role, and he can use a bit more of that rebound, which we know he has. So what I know of Tyler Young, I reckon it was either last year or the year before. I remember seeing a stat that he was like the number 1 rated one-on-one defender in the competition over a short game stretch. I think it might have been like the back half of the season or something like that. So he is a good one-on-one defender. He was also ranked 8th in the league this year, just from 7 games, of rebound 50s per game. So offers some rebound. We know he's good on one-on-one. And his intercept game is solid. I actually remember on the live stream on True Footy, we did West Coast v Richmond at Optus, the one that ended horribly, or was horrible for most of the game, at least half of it. And Tyler Young killed us that day. It didn't help that we kicked the ball poorly inside 50, as we so often do, and that was a particularly bad game, but he took a lot of intercept marks. So I see a relatively well-rounded key position defender there that, I'm not going to back him into being All-Australian one day or anything like that, but should he improves us. And that's really what we're about at the moment. We need to prioritise the draft. We need to get in some established players, and it's a position of need. So this is a really nice, a pleasantly surprising piece of news. Let's move on to what Don Pike said earlier today, I think it was. So firstly, he made some comments on list needs. I mean, I think the only takeaway here is that he said the midfield is an area of priority. We knew that. But to be honest with you, I just wanted some confirmation that West Coast are thinking along the lines of what everyone else is saying, and I think our midfield is diabolical. I saw on, I think it was the Trade Radio show that they do, Josh Jenkins came up with a 5-step plan for how to fix West Coast. Agreed with some of it, not all of it, and one of the points was stop chopping and changing the midfield. I suppose my response to that would be not that he's wrong, for the midfield is diabolical, and we chopped and changed a lot in 2025. The reason we did that is because we don't have any solutions currently on our list. So, I kind of respect the way that we tried new things in the midfield. Guys like Ryan and Brockman, Liam Baker, those guys got some exposure at AFL level. I think Hutchinson spent some time in the midfield this year. We also got a lot of young kids in there as well. So that was kind of a product of what was already the case at West Coast, a very, very weak midfield, Tim Kelly underperforming. Hopefully we can move away from that, but I understand why we did it in the first place. So it's nice to hear that we've raised the midfield as a really big area of concern, because that is absolutely where I would start with this particular list. So then we'll talk about pick 19. So I think the context for this interview was in response to the priority pick we've been given, which is currently pick 19, possibly becomes like 22 or something like that. So interestingly, I think yesterday I harped on quite a bit about how I expect this pick goes to Brisbane for Brandon Starcevic in a trade. My confidence in that belief is shaken a lot by what was said today by Don Pike, and in a good way, because it actually means that we're probably unlikely to use it as in a deal for Starcevic. So I guess we'll start on Starcevic. The quote was, "We'll touch base with Brisbane and inquire about his well-being." This is from Don Pike. "His recent history with concussion is known, and it's something we have to factor in." Okay, this is just something that makes me feel a little bit more relaxed that West Coast knows what it's doing. And, last year maybe really burned. It really was just one diabolical trade last year. Other than that, I feel like I can trust us, but there's no doubt my confidence has been shaken. He says it's a known. We know he has history there, and therefore will contract accordingly. Okay, so a couple of things there. We're well aware of the contract situation here. I reckon it's implied that we're probably not going to offer a first-round draft pick, which we consider the priority pick currently is, even though it's more likely to be in the 20s. And we'll contract accordingly. This is an interesting one, maybe not the time or the place for it. What do you do with a player with concussion issues? Because I do have a sense of empathy for a player that has suffered workplace injuries and is getting less money as a result of it. I understand West Coast wanting to protect themselves there in terms of risk. I just think it's an iffy situation there. It's actually not the contract that bothers me with Starcevic. It's probably the trade collateral that we give up. I just feel like our salary cap is going to be so plentiful over the next few years. And maybe that's naive, but I don't think that's the biggest hurdle for us. That being said, we'll see what happens there. But he was asked more directly about pick 19, we'll call it that for the time being. And he says there's opportunities there to combine the Hawthorn pick, which I think is currently 15, probably becomes 18, with one of those picks to try and elevate up. So he kind of suggests that we might actually package this priority pick with the other Hawthorn pick there to move up into the earlier parts of the draft. Now, we know that there's at least a couple of sides that are going to be willing to trade down. At least that's the way it appears. Carlton is one of them, because of Tom DeConey compensation pick that will be generated. It'll be band 1, no doubt. So that gives them around pick 10, let's call it that. And we know that they're likely to trade that because it's just going to get absorbed in a Harry Dean bid anyway. So that's on the market, and Carlton have expressed that publicly. Gold Coast pick 8 as well will similarly, I think it's pick 6, let's call it 8, it will be 8. Now that could also be up for grabs because that will be absorbed in a bid for Patterson and Hewland as well, 2 top 3 picks that they have in this year's draft. So in theory that's gettable as well. There has been some suggestion that might go to Melbourne for Christian Petrarca. For me, maybe that will happen, but then I don't understand how Gold Coast get enough points to match their 2 top 3 prospects because they're not going to let them slide. So I don't know what happens there, but we can assume pick 8 could be on the cards for us. So that's pick 8 or pick 10 is a really good opportunity for us to target. If we end up with 1, 2, and pick 8, we're looking at maybe a combination of Willem Dersma, maybe Dyson Sharp at this point. If we go to pick 2, Sullivan Roby would be another contender. I don't know if that's realistic at this point. And maybe like a Jacob Farrell at pick 8, or I don't know if Xavier Taylor will still be there. Again, we have time to really get into the nuts and bolts of who's likely to be there, but 3 top 10 prospects is really solid. I still think we have the option of trading 1 or 2 down. I do kind of hope West Coast explores this. Don Pyke does not address this, and nor should he. You don't say publicly that you're willing to trade picks down because it obviously works against your negotiating power, but I still think this is possible here because it allows us the opportunity to get 4 or 5 picks in the top 10 if we are so bold. So I also think the reason it's hard to speculate on this, okay, you can make the easy connection. Essendon might want to get a top 2 pick to draft, Willem Dersma or Cooper Duff Tyler, or whoever that is. I've also read a big footy rumour. Melbourne love Sullivan Roby and want to get that pick, and somehow that becomes part of a deal for Gold Coast getting, it gets a little bit messy here, but there's a possibility that Melbourne would be interested in that pick. But why I think pick 2 is also going to generally just be a targeted pick this year, I think West Coast will be open to it, if I'm honest. And there's also the fact that there's clubs seeking Zach Merritt, there's clubs seeking Charlie Curnow, and suddenly we have a valuable pick there that could be enough to turn Carlton's head, for instance. And it could be enough to, satisfy Melbourne for Christian Petrarca or whatever. There is so much water to go under the bridge and so much to play out here that I think pick 2 will be targeted, and I think we should explore it. Now, what should we give that pick up for? I'd be looking at 2 top 10 picks, not necessarily pick 2 for 5 and 6. I think that's probably a little bit stacked in our favour, but let's just say even pick 1. I don't really care if we have pick 1 or pick 2 at the moment because of my concerns about Willem Dersma, for us at least. But let's just say one of those picks needs to come down to be 5 or 6 and 7. Now, both of those picks currently belong to Essendon. Maybe we chuck in one of our picks in the 20s because we suddenly have a few lying around. 2 and 23 for 6 and 7. I actually think that's a really good outcome. In that scenario, we could hold, if it's pick 2 we trade, pick 1, pick 5, pick 6, and pick 8 if we also do a deal with the Gold Coast Suns. 4 picks in the top 8 plus Charlie Banfield later. I think this has the potential to be a really strong draft for us where we probably get in and dip out early. It is considered a shallow draft. Unlike last year, I think there'll be less picks, and I think West Coast is in a position to go hard on the early top 10 talent. You're looking at talents like, Willem Dersma, Darton Sharp, Aiden Schubert if we decide to go for a key forward. I don't think it's the most pressing need, but sometimes when you have 4 picks in the top 10, you just go best available, and he does look good. Jacob Farrell, Sam Cumming, even someone like a Xavier Taylor. If we got 4 picks in this range, we can afford to go best available. Ideally, picking at least 1 or 2 midfielders, I would have thought. So you then focus on the draft from that point of view, and then we can use our later rookie selections to look at mature talent who can improve the side in the short term, because Don Pyke's also quoted as saying, we're trying to bring in some experienced players that can assist in that gap that is 23 to 28-year-olds. So we know about Starcevic and we know about Tyler Young. We've also been linked to Tom Berry and Devin Robertson as players from other clubs. But I just want to go through what he said about our rookie list spot usage. So yesterday I sort of suggested that they could be used for next generation academy talents. That is absolutely on the cards. But Don Pyke said this about the rookie list spots. He said it's the ability to bring in those mid-range guys who are good AFL footballers who may have found themselves either off the list. They might be good waffle VFL players. We know that they've got the potential to play AFL footy, but they're going to bolster our squad and put pressure on the spots. That's really important. He then highlights the midfield again. He says this is where we would target those sorts of guys. There's a number of guys out there we believe will give us some real opportunity to bring in who have AFL experience, know what the level is, have good training habits, and will really add to the group from a cultural point of view. So that's probably more your Devin Robertson, your Tom Berry, of course, and then potentially even a Brandon Parfitt who has 130 games of AFL experiences. Suddenly, like if you've got 10 rookie spots, the opportunity cost of going for a Brandon Parfitt suddenly lessens quite significantly. So there's a few guys who can make it to the rookie list. I can't imagine Devin Robertson is going to cost the world, nor will Tom Berry. Perhaps we could sign them to the rookie list. Perhaps we could even play funny buggers and, move Jamie Cripps to the rookie list. Like we have that flexibility. Other guys we could look at, we heard about Tom Blamires in the VFL. He won the Best and Fairest Award in the VFL. We talked about him yesterday. And we were also pretty close to picking Milan Murdoch in the mid-season draft, who plays at East Fremantle. And then in the end, we took Jacob Newton instead. But I'd imagine we could knock on that door again. So then you probably then have some decisions to make around, our NGAs. We can't pick them all. Tyler Williams probably seems like the most likely. Then there's Kobe Evans and of Wes Wally to consider as well. So there's a lot of different things we could do with these rookie spots, and it is exciting. Obviously, with the position we're in, we do need to try a number of different angles to try and improve it. And it sounds like West Coast have tried to pull every lever, not massively successfully. I mean, you look at the top, we tried to get Chad Warner. We couldn't get that done, naturally. So we're going then for Brandon Starcevic, who's an established premiership player, although not like an A grader of the competition. We tried to get Judd McVie, a young up-and-coming talent. We're looking at Dev Robertson. We're looking at Tom Berry. We are looking at every single method. We're looking at state leagues, and we've also got an opportunity to draft very early and dip out of this year's draft. So let me know in the comments what you think about what Don Pyke said, what I've said. I've come up with some random hypotheticals here. I would love 4 picks in the top 10 if we can make that work, if that means trading 2 down. I think that could work for us, to be honest, given what our needs are. So let me know in the comments what you think. Make sure you subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Up the Eagles.